Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about my birth story when I was over 300 pounds with my son. This has been so highly requested since I mentioned it. I did have some complications. I had a lot of post-baby complications, and yes, most of them due to my weight. So I wrote down kind of like everything I wanted to talk about. So first, I guess I'm going to talk about how I found out I was pregnant. So I was 19, and we had just moved to California. My husband was in the Marine Corps, so we were living on Camp Pendleton. And we were trying. I know we were young, but we were married. We were living on our own, and we felt like we were ready. So we were trying. And one night, I just was so sick. It felt like I had the flu. I thought I was dying. I was laying in bed with a wet washcloth on my forehead, and I was like miserable, just so nauseous, couldn't even move, felt like crap. So my husband actually woke up at like 5 a.m. for work, and I was still awake in the bed, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I seriously feel horrible." So as soon as he walked out the door and left for work, I ran to the bathroom and I started throwing up. And it sounds so weird, but I was literally leaning over the toilet, just threw up, and I was just like I knew instantly. Like it was like out of a movie. Like I instantly knew that I was pregnant. So I took a test and it was super faint positive. So I was like, okay, I need to go to Walmart. So I texted my friend Kylie and I was like, come to Walmart with me, but she was sleeping. It was like so early in the morning. So I ran to Walmart by myself, got a test, and she's like, by the time I was done, she woke up. She's like, you need to take it, cover it with toilet paper, and come to my house. So I did. I took the test, covered it up, drove over to her house, and we looked at it together, and it was definitely positive. So that's when I found out. And that day, I told my husband that I had started my monthly. And so he was like, oh, like, I guess you're not pregnant. I was like, no. Because then, you know, he kind of was suspicious because I was sick. And I was like, no, I just started today, like trying to trick him. So I have a video of me telling him, so I will post that right here.
Hey, you're pregnant? Why'd you lie to me, babe? No way. Are you sure?
I'm positive.
No.
So after that, we called the doctor and we scheduled an appointment. I was only like 3 weeks pregnant when I found out. I found out really early. And the earliest that they would see me at the doctor's office was 8 weeks. So we had to wait a little bit. And then when I was 8 weeks, we went in, had our first ultrasound, and it was the best feeling in the world. We were so excited. Obviously, I was not the healthiest. They were making sure they ran all the blood tests and everything. We found out early on that I had, back before I was pregnant, like back in high school, I was on thyroid medication. I had some thyroid issues, and I got off that medication, and then when I got pregnant, my thyroid was all out of whack. So she wanted to make sure that, you know, we got it under control so that it was safe for the baby and everything. So I was on thyroid medication for my whole pregnancy. I really didn't have a ton of complications during pregnancy. I had high blood pressure that they were keeping an eye on. Obviously, I was high risk because I was, you know, super obese. So we just had to make sure that everything was going good the whole time. Went to my regular appointment. I was about 14 weeks. We went to an early ultrasound because we wanted to know the gender really bad. So we did a gender ultrasound. We put it in an envelope. We had a gender reveal party with some of my husband's friends and a few of my friends in California, but it was an epic fail. That's a whole other story time. If you guys want that story time of how my gender reveal party got ruined, I will do that. So let me know if you want that, but that's a whole other thing. So we found out, but we didn't want to tell our family because Christmas was coming up. So I found out I was pregnant at the very end of August. So by the time it was Christmas, we wanted to announce during Christmas to, you know, the whole family. So I'll insert those videos here.
Are we doing it? Hey, you only got 10 seconds, Mom. You better hurry up. Mom, hurry up. Mom, you are bored.
So we were beyond excited about a boy, especially my husband. Of course, he really wanted a boy. And I didn't care at that time, you know, my first baby, I just wanted a healthy baby. So I was so excited when we found out we were having a boy. We picked out his name. I was actually watching a YouTube video of this mom who gave birth to twins, and one of her twins' middle names was Weston, and I was like, ooh, I like that name. So I wrote it down, and that is what we ended up choosing, which I loved, of course. So like I said, I didn't have too many complications during pregnancy. I had no morning sickness. Besides that first day that I found out I was pregnant, I did not throw up one time. I did not get nauseous one time. I was super, super lucky, which makes me nervous for my next pregnancy because I have a feeling I'm gonna be screwed and gonna get the worst morning sickness ever. But I was very lucky, had no morning sickness at all. I did have sciatica in my back, which is like your sciatic nerve, to where I literally thought I was dying. The pain from that sciatic nerve was insane. I had it like my whole second trimester, and it was miserable. But other than that, everything was going smooth. I did have to go to some extra ultrasounds to check his size because they were concerned that he was going to be really, really big, probably because I was so big, and he was measuring ahead, so they had us go for some extra ultrasounds to keep measuring him as I got farther along. Like when I was probably 36 weeks, I had an ultrasound to make sure that they weren't gonna have to induce me early or anything because they were that concerned that he was gonna be that big. But they didn't, and everything was fine. So other than that, that's really the only issues I had. So when I was about 38 weeks, I started doing, you know, self-inducing things, which I wish I hadn't, and I'll get to that. I'll get to why later, but you know, I did the pineapple, I did the walking, I did the everything. I did not do castor oil because I think that's not safe for you or the baby. But everything else, I pretty much did everything else. Bounced on a ball, I ate spicy food, I, you know, did everything. And I started doing primrose oil, which is supposed to help soften your cervix, because I was getting checked at, I think I got checked at 38 weeks, and I was 0 dilated, completely thick and high, like not even close to having the baby. So that's when I started doing everything. And then 39 weeks came, and I was still completely closed, completely not effaced, nothing. Like, this baby's never gonna come. So 39 weeks and 5, well, okay, the night before my water broke, I was having contractions in bed, and I was tracking them on my phone, and I didn't really think anything too much of it because they weren't super, super consistent, and they weren't super strong, but they were there. So I was just tracking them on my phone. I texted my mom, I was like, I'm having some contractions, and she's like, okay, just keep an eye on them, and blah, blah, blah. So I ended up falling asleep. I don't know, it was probably about 11 o'clock at night. So I wake up at 6 a.m. It was about 6 a.m. and I turned over to get comfortable, and my water breaks all over the bed. I actually took a picture of it. I don't know if I'm gonna insert it, we'll see. I don't want this video to get demonetized, but it might. So my water breaks, and I'm like, oh my God, my husband's already at work. So I sit up, I'm like, I literally out loud, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like I was freaking out. So I called my doctor, and she's like, okay, like, is this your first baby? It was like one of the nurses, and I was like, yes. And she's like, okay, just take a shower, eat some breakfast, like telling me to take my time because your first baby usually takes longer. Wish I would have listened to her, but I was like, okay. So I called my mother-in-law. I was calling my husband, and he wasn't answering. So I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God, why is he not answering? What's going on? So I was like freaking out. I was like, he needs to pick up the phone. So I called my mother-in-law, and meanwhile, like, when your water breaks, it doesn't just break and then that's it. Like, it continuously like leaks out. So I'm walking around the house like wobbling with the towel between my legs, like freaking out. I took a shower, calling my husband, he's not answering. So of course I'm in a panic. I call his work. That day he had a like special PT, so they do like running and stuff in the mornings, but that day was their battalion PT, so he actually took a bus or something to a faraway location on base, farther than normal, and he didn't have his phone or anything. So they radioed over to his higher ups that were like doing it with them, and they were like, Keathley, your wife's in labor, you need to go. So he like sprinted to his friend's car. His friend drove him back to the house, and we took off, got our bags, we had our hospital bags packed, and we took off to the hospital. So we get to the hospital and they make sure to check the fluid to make sure that my water did break, and they confirmed that my water broke. I was pretty certain of it, but sometimes you can accidentally like pee and think it's your water, but no, it's definitely my water. So they admitted me to our room and they checked me, and I was completely not dilated, nothing, not effaced. My cervix was still really high, and you know, everything was just the same as I was. So this was 39 weeks and 5 days. So I was almost to my due date and still nothing, but my water had broken, so they had to, you know, start inducing me. Now, the reason why I say I regretted trying to induce myself and not let the baby just come when he was ready and when my body was ready is because I had the longest, worst labor of my life, because my body was not ready for my baby to come out yet. I probably would have went to 41 weeks if I just would have been patient. But of course, it was my first baby. I was ready for him to come out. So if you're a first time mom, I suggest I know everyone says, just let it happen. No, seriously, just let it happen, because it was probably one of my biggest regrets of my entire pregnancy and everything, because the snowball effect was horrible. So they started giving me Cervidil, which is like a pill that they put up to try to help dilate you. We did as many rounds of that as you're allowed, I think. Like, we did a bunch of rounds. Then they started me on Pitocin, and eventually I got my epidural because the contractions after the Pitocin were intense. It was very painful. I knew when I got pregnant that I wanted an epidural. Props to all you natural moms. I give you all the credit in the world. I could never. So I got the epidural. The epidural didn't really hurt. What hurt was trying to hold still when I was having contractions, getting the epidural. It was just kind of like a, just like a pinch in your back. So once I got the epidural, I fell asleep. And then I woke up to having some pain. So I was like, I can feel the contractions. Like, I'm not supposed to feel the contractions. And they told me, they came in to adjust the epidural, but they told me that I probably had what's called, I think, a window or something in your epidural, to where like one spot isn't getting the medicine or something. I don't know, I'm not a nurse, but this is kind of just what I remembered. So I could feel all the contractions in this one spot, and it sucked. So I would like press the little button and it would give me more, and then after like 30 minutes it would start to hurt again. So I was pretty miserable, and mind you, it has probably been about 30 hours at this point. I was in labor for a total of 40 hours. So I was at the hospital for a very long time. They were checking me. I would be at a 3. They would check me again. I was at a 5. They checked me and I was at like a 7.5. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so close. I was so excited. It had been so long. And mind you, my water has been broken this whole time. So I didn't learn until later that your water is not supposed to be broken for, I think, longer than like 24 hours, because your risk of infection goes up. So keep that in mind. So it was coming on the 40th hour and they checked me and I went backwards. So my cervix started to swell because my baby was massive and he was pushing up against my cervix with his head, causing it to swell closed. So they told me that my cervix was getting smaller and I was just a mess. I was a wreck because, one, I said from the day I got pregnant, I do not want a C-section. I do not want a C-section. I want to give birth vaginally. Please, God, I do not want a C-section. I swore, I said I will not have one. But you know how birth plans go. They never go how you think they're gonna go. So the doctor told me that my cervix was swelling and that we probably are gonna have to go in for a C-section. And I said, please, please. And he said, I can give you 1 more hour. Actually, I think he said 3 more hours and check you. And I said, okay. So 1 hour goes by and he comes in and checks me, and my cervix swelled even more shut. So they started getting ready for a C-section, and I was instantly a hot mess. Instantly got freaked out, started throwing up. My baby's heart rate dropped. They could not find his heart rate. So now they're rushing me into the OR, like running me down the hallway in my bed. I'm freaking out, thinking that something's wrong with my baby. They're scrambling, trying to find his heartbeat. So of course I'm bawling and throwing up at the same time. So they get me in the OR. It's cold and scary. And since I had the window in my epidural, I could feel some spots. So the doctor was tapping on my stomach where they cut. And he said, "Can you feel this?" Like he was tapping around it. And I said, "No, I could feel a little bit above." And so he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna start cutting, and if you feel any pain, you let me know." So I'm like freaking out. I'm like, "Please, please, 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 please. I do not want to feel this pain." Like I was freaking out. So they were like this close to having to put me asleep for the whole C-section, which would have been even more devastating. And I know that that happens to some mamas, and I can't even imagine having to be put to sleep and missing, you know, the whole birth and everything. I would have been a wreck. But thankfully he started to cut, and I could feel the pressure. So in the C-section, you can feel everything, but not the pain. So it's just a lot of pressure, and you can just feel what they're doing, but you can't feel pain. So thankfully I wasn't feeling the pain. So I'm super nauseous. I have the shakes from the epidural. I'm just like, my teeth are chattering. If you know, you know. And they started the C-section. So my husband was next to me. He took some pictures, and out came my baby at 9:03 p.m. on May 19th, 2016. So he was born 3 hours before his due date. And it was the best day of our lives, honestly. I don't want to get emotional. If you're a mama, you know. It was the best day of my life, completely life-changing. I love him so much. He was almost 9 pounds. He was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. So he wasn't as big. They were telling me he was gonna be like over 10 pounds. So he was still a big baby, but he wasn't as big as they were expecting when it was like right on my due date. So he was about 9 pounds, and he came out with a giant cone head because the poor thing had been stuck for so long, 40 hours of trying to come out. His head was like, whoop. My husband cut the cord, and of course, like, I got to hold him while they were, you know, putting me all back together. So I'll insert those pictures and everything. But my husband got to watch him get cleaned off and everything, and they put me back together, and we got transferred back to our post-op room, where I got to breastfeed him for the first time, which went really well. I ended up nursing him for 1 whole year, so it's something I was really proud of, considering the next part of the story, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, I got to nurse him for the first time, and we just got to cuddle, and he laid on my chest, and it was just pure bliss, the best moments of my life. And seeing my husband become a daddy was just something you'll never ever forget. So May 19th was definitely the best day, and even though I was in labor for 40 hours, it was obviously all worth it. So we spent the regular amount of days in the hospital for a C-section, which is I think like 3 days or something, which we had already been there for 3 days, like 2 days. So we were like, ugh, we just want to go home so bad. And my mother-in-law and my husband's grandma flew in to see the baby. So they got there like the next day, and we went home after a couple days. So I actually got staples, and before I left, they took the staples out, which later I was told was a mistake. I know a lot of women get stitches, dissolvable stitches, but they stapled me and then took the staples out before I left the hospital. We'll get to that in a little bit. So we get home, everything's good, you know, just regular new mom stuff, exhausted and so much pain from my C-section. There wasn't a lot, I could barely even stand. It was really hard trying to take care of a baby and also, you know, take care of yourself. Thankfully I had my mother-in-law there, and my husband was off work for 10 days. So I think it was about 3 days after we were home, I was sitting on the couch, and I'm just gonna warn you, this part is kind of graphic, so if you don't like graphic stuff, fast forward or turn it off. I was sitting on the couch with my son, and I started to smell what I thought was my dog. I thought my dog had like went to the bathroom in the house. So we're looking around for like poop in the house, like what is this smell? This is so gross, I'm sorry, this is like really TMI, but I took a poll on my Instagram. You guys wanted to hear everything, so here you go. Smelled really bad. My mother-in-law smelled it, like we were like, what is this? Couldn't figure it out, couldn't find anything. So for some reason, I just like put my hand onto my stomach, and I pulled my hand up, and there was just brown fluid all over my hand. So of course I start panicking, give my baby to my mother-in-law. I get up and I realize that I am gushing this fluid that smells like death and is brown and slightly red out of my incision. So it's coming out of my incision from my C-section. So I had to put paper towels. The paper towels were getting soaked in this fluid. Like when I say I was gushing, this is so gross. I mean, it was a lot, and it was horrifying. I had no clue what was happening. I was so scared. So instantly I called my doctor, and she was like, can you have your husband look at it for me? Mind you, I'm over 300 pounds. So I had a flab that you had to lift up, and then my incision was underneath my flab. So I had to take care of it as well as I could. Like after my showers, I'd have to blow dry it dry to make sure no moisture was getting trapped, etc. So I lift it up to show my husband, and it's literally squirting out at this point, and he's like dodging. It's just, it was not a good situation. So she's like, okay, you need to come into my office immediately. Like we'll write it down as an emergency appointment, blah, blah, blah. So we pack up my son in his car seat, we get on the road, and mind you, my doctor's office was about 25 minutes from our house, so we're rushing there. We get there, I'm hunched over at this point. Like I'm in so much pain, and I'm hunched over walking into her office. She lays me down, lifts up my stomach, looks at my incision, and instantly says, oh honey, this is really infected. We need to get you to the hospital right now. So my heart drops, I start crying. We had just got back from the hospital, and now she's telling me that I have a very serious infection. So I am panicking. She calls the hospital where I gave birth, which is like another 15 minutes away. I gave birth in La Jolla, San Diego, Scripps in La Jolla. So we lived in Oceanside, so it was a little bit of a haul to get there, but we went, we got me checked in, they wheeled me to my room, and this is where I was pretty much traumatized. I don't really talk about this that often. You know, when I tell the story to my friends and my family and stuff, like I just tell it, but it honestly was a very traumatic experience for me. I do not want to cry. So basically what they had to do is first they took some swabs to test to see what kind of infection it was, because obviously my mom is texting me and my dad, they lived in Indiana, so they were like, make sure it's not MRSA. Like they were freaking out, they didn't know what it was. So they took some swabs to get tested, and they had to clean it out. So normally, I found out later, you go back into surgery to get it cleaned out. They didn't take me into surgery. They took me into a room, and they gave me some medicine to kind of relax my body, and it was like a pain medicine that I think was supposed to like numb me. I mean, it did feel good, but I could still feel the pain. So they had to reopen my wound. So it wasn't completely closed anyways. They took the staples out, and it wasn't even closed all the way. So part of it was closed, part of it was open. So they had to reopen the incision, and they had to clean it out. I did not want to cry. And so I'm screaming bloody murder. the pain was unlike anything I had ever felt in my entire life. Honestly, felt like I was in a horror movie. It hurt so bad. Worse than any part of labor, worse than anything I've ever felt in my life. So they're cleaning it out, doing everything. And then they told me that I needed what's called a wound vac. So if you don't know what a wound vac is, basically it's a machine that you, they put like this foam type stuff. They stuff your wound with this foam, and then they attach a wound vac, so it kind of just sucks out all the extra fluid into this little container that you keep with you. So it's continuously sucking out fluid. I know nurses know more than me, but basically it's just letting me heal from the inside up rather than closing it back up, because if they were to close it up, it would just trap the infection and everything like that. So I had to stay in the hospital for 3 days to get IV antibiotics, you know, antibiotics through an IV, and they had to keep me hooked up to the wound vac. And then every day or so they would come in and they would change my foam. So they would have to take the foam out and restuff it. And they were giving me pain meds, which it still hurt, but it wasn't as bad. But sometimes like your wound would heal over the foam. So when they took the foam out, it was just like this feeling that I can't even explain. So it sucked really bad. And I was also, you know, a new mom, feeling all these kind of emotions, and still trying to nurse. They did a CT scan to make sure the infection hadn't spread anywhere else in my body, and they had to give me this dye to go in my body, and they told me that it wasn't breastfeeding, it wasn't safe for breastfeeding. So I start freaking out. They told me I had to pump, so I pumped a bunch of colostrum, and then they told me, oh, never mind, here's a paper, if you sign this, like, it's, the new studies say that it's fine for breastfeeding. So I was like, thank God, because I didn't want to have to give him a bottle and then confuse him, you know. So that was a whole other thing. I was breastfeeding, strictly breastfeeding the whole time as I'm like miserable. So that was hard. It was just a really hard couple days. So after the 3 days, they told me that I would need a portable wound vac to take home with me. So they issued me a portable wound vac. Had my amazing home health nurse Lisa come to my house. Lisa, if you're watching this, you already know how I feel about you. She would come like every couple days to change the foam and check on my wound and measure it and do all the things that nurses do. And as a new mom, you know, my husband had to go back to work. He spent his 10 days off practically in the hospital with me, so he had to go back to work. And my mom, actually, when I found out that I had the infection, my mom bought a ticket and flew out. So my mom was there, thankfully. But after my mom left, I was, you know, I was alone. I didn't have family. It was just me and my baby, and, you know, I was still in pain and going through all of this, all the postpartum things. And Lisa was just a friend to me. She would come over and, you know, do all the nurse things, but it was just good to see her smiling face every day. I'll always be thankful for her. So Lisa, thank you forever and ever. You know how thankful I am for you. So after a few months, my wound was small again and I could take care of it on my own. I just had to, like, you know, do all the patching. And so Lisa's last day, she brought me flowers, and that was it. It was a very, very long and horrible recovery. I was in a lot of pain, but even through all of that, it was worth every single second, because I have my precious, perfect baby who is now 2.5 years old. So I asked my doctor, why did I get this infection? And she kind of told me there's multiple reasons. One, because I was in labor for so long. So my water had broken. That just right there leads to a higher risk of infections. Also, what they think happened is my baby I was in labor for so long that he had a bowel movement inside. So some of that bacteria had gotten trapped when they closed up my wound. Some of the bacteria was trapped in there. And then also the fact that I was overweight. You have a much higher risk of infection when you're extremely overweight. So my weight was a huge cause of that, which she was honest with me and told me that, and I totally agree. But there was a lot of things. My home health nurse didn't think that they should have taken my staples out. When I told her that, she was like, what? Like, that is not right. They took my staples out and gave me steri strips, and that's it. And I wasn't even completely closed all the way. So that didn't make sense. There was a lot of things, but definitely my weight was one of them, and I will be the first to admit that. So what I'm hoping for in my next pregnancy, I wanted to have a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after C-section, but the risks are so scary to me. I know that there's risks to having multiple C-sections as well. So after you have one C-section, the most common thing is you get the rest of your births are C-sections, because your uterus can rupture from the old incision and things like that. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that. It's terrifying. I think the whole time, if I'd be trying to have a vaginal birth, I'd be freaking out that my uterus was going to explode. Like, I don't know. So if there's any mamas that are educated on VBACs, please leave me a comment down below. If you did it, let me know. I know you have to be like kind of in good health, which I am. I'm at my goal weight. I'm in great health. I exercise. I don't know. I think that I could be a good candidate, but with my past infection and things like that, I'm not sure. So it's something I'd have to talk to my doctor about whenever we do get pregnant again. I would love to do that, but I don't know. We'll see when the time comes what I decide to do. But that's it, you guys. That's my birth story. Hope that was exciting. I don't know. Feel free to share yours down below. Yeah, so I don't know. I know this isn't weight loss related, but it's very highly requested. I have a lot of mama videos that are highly requested, so I don't know. Let me know if you guys like these kind of videos that aren't weight loss related, or if you kind of just want me to stick to strictly weight loss. I would like to transition somewhat into lifestyle videos. And I know when I get pregnant next time, I'll be doing like, you know, bump dates and gender reveal video, and maybe even film our birth. I don't know. So yeah, just let me know. Thank you guys for watching. I know this is probably a super long video, and I will see you guys in my next one.